Welcome back to my channel, everybody, or welcome to my channel. I am Rose and I have type 1 diabetes. In this video I'm going to be talking, I guess, about my story, how I was diagnosed, how I knew I should go to the doctors because something wasn't right, and basically just like some situations of how my diabetes affects me. This video was kind of like totally unplanned, so I blabber a lot, and hopefully when I'm editing it I can kind of make it a timeline that makes sense. Yeah, this video is about my diabetes. I don't know why I chose for it to be a makeup video, but it is. Before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I am trying to upload at least once or twice a week. Let's just crack on into the video. So of course it would only be right to use the Jeffree Star Blood Sugar palette. I mean, come on, what other palette would be more suitable for this topic? So where do I start? I'm just going to quickly run through the difference between type 1 and type 2, because more than likely, no, I don't have the same diabetes as your granddad. Like, everybody always seems to, like, I've heard that so many times basically. So there is type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Type 1, to sum it up, basically my pancreas stopped working. It was unavoidable, it was gonna just happen, and it will never work again. So that's why people have injections for insulin, or like me, I have the insulin pump. And then type 2 diabetics don't respond to insulin as well as they should, and later in the disease don't often make enough insulin. So I guess what it is they do still have insulin, but their body isn't working with it properly, so they have to have extra help with whatever way type 2 diabetics deal with it. I'm pretty sure I saw a letter not long ago saying I was diagnosed in 2010, so it has been 10 years, which, oh my god, I still remember being like, oh my god, it's been like 3 years since I was diagnosed. God knows where that time went, because that went bloody fast. So yeah, I was about late 13. So the way I started to get my symptoms and knew that I was diabetic, well, I didn't know. Basically, how I got to the conclusion that I was diabetic. Luckily, I didn't get ill. I know some people unfortunately end up in hospital with no idea that they're diabetic and they're just like poorly or whatever, but for me, I was just thirsty. I was so bloody thirsty. I remember sitting in tech class at school and the teacher was a bit unapproachable, and I'd already asked to go refill my water bottle, and I didn't want to ask her again, so I was like begging all my friends to go in the other room to get me like some more water. I was so thirsty to the point where I couldn't eat because I was so full up of water. My mouth was a bloody desert basically. And I didn't really think anything of it to go to the doctors about it. I mean, so the idea that got diabetes into my head, I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I was 13. What the hell am I gonna know, you know? So basically, I was on MSN, if you remember that. That was like the good old days. I was on MSN on webcam to my cousin Abby, and she was like sat in the kitchen with her webcam, and her mum was just like doing chores in the background or whatever. And so I just mentioned, I was like, oh, Auntie Paula. I don't actually say Auntie Paula, I just say Paula. I was basically saying, oh, I'm just so thirsty. Like, I was just complaining about it because I guess it was becoming that much of an issue that I was just banging on about it to people, that I was just so bloody thirsty. And anyway, Paula mentioned to me about diabetes, and I guess, I don't really remember what happened from there because it was such a long while ago, but that is what struck the idea in my mind, so cheers for that, Paula. Yeah, so I guess from there my mum booked me a doctor's appointment because, yeah, I'm one of them kids. I would still get my mum to book my doctor's appointment for me now if I could, but I obviously do that stuff for myself. But obviously my mum rang with the doctors for me and made an appointment, and I think what happened was I went in for a blood test. I think the nurse gave me a blood test. From the blood sample that she took, I guess she like tested like the glucose levels like you do like when you are diabetic, and they were high. Bearing in mind this was a fasting blood test, so I guess I hadn't eaten for like, I don't know how long it's supposed to be, like 12 hours, since the day before basically. I hadn't eaten anything and my sugars were like, if I'm guessing, I think 16, 17. And if you'd not eaten and you're not diabetic, then why the hell would your sugars be high like that, right? I suppose she sent the bloods off for testing. And so we went home and we were meant to come back in like a couple of days or whatever, or maybe the next day. So I went home and I was just there a bit like, what the hell, I might be diabetic. I don't think I was scared, I was just a bit like, oh, surely not, you know, like, nah. I think I was crying. I can't remember. I think if anything, anything, I was confused. I was just very confused. I even remember what top I was wearing on that day. Like, it's just one of them moments, you know. I think we went back to the doctors the next day. I'm not sure why. I can't remember like how it came about. We went back for another blood test, and I remember the blood just, it wasn't coming out of my arms. It was one of those painful ones where they have to keep prodding you to try and get the blood out of different veins. And I was feeling so weak and just wanting to bloody faint, basically. I think this wasn't a fasting blood test, and I remember specifically I think I had like McDonald's with a Fanta, like a full sugar Fanta, and if anything, thinking about it, that was probably the last ever time I drank a full sugar drink without even thinking about it, without having to drink it to make my blood sugars come back up from a hypo. So yeah, I had like a McDonald's with a normal sugar Fanta, and went in for the blood test, and I think my sugars were like 27, so obviously, yeah, that's freaking not right. I was taken into hospital that exact same day, and I ended up staying in for 3 days. They, I guess, took more tests from me and said, yep, you're diabetic. My makeup has taken ages. Why did I decide to do my makeup and talk? So they told me I was diabetic, and my reaction was, I think I was crying a lot. I was just confused. To be normal and to be able to eat whatever you want and not have to worry, to being told suddenly for the rest of your whole life, every single day you've got to have injections 4 times a day, finger prick, blah 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 blah, can't eat this, can't eat that. It's a lot to take in. I personally think I was lucky to be diagnosed at that age. For other people, maybe not. I was definitely more of a sensible teenager for most parts, so personally think I dealt with it quite well. I just cried a lot. My mum cried a lot. I guess she was just really worried about me. Yeah, it was a lot, and it is a lot to take in. I think a lot of people don't realise what quite goes behind being diabetic. I think they just think you just can't eat that cake, but you can. But I did deal with it well. Luckily, I'm not too scared of needles. It's one of them things where I don't like it, but if I know I've got to do it, I get it done. I did take it in quite well. I was in hospital for 3 days. I remember when we come home, I was sat on the sofa, had all this stuff that I'd come home with, like my little insulin pens. I think I started with actual syringes though. Yeah, it kind of went okay. I didn't go to school for a good while because it was a lot to wrap my head around. The thought of being on my own in school after having to deal with all of that was a bit much. So I did have a good while to be able to get my head around it and I guess kind of get used to it. One thing I will say is I really do feel for parents that have babies or really young children with diabetes. I think one thing I heard once is that having like a cold or something can strike the diabetes, like that can trigger it. That certain times of year a lot of kids or even adults too do come in getting diagnosed with diabetes, and I think I had not long been ill. In fact, within that last year before I was actually diagnosed, I had passed out a couple of times. One time I passed out when I got up in the morning to go to the toilet and I fainted like into the bath. Luckily it was empty, but I woke up, I was like, oh my god, mum, I just woke up in the bath. I was so confused. I thought I'd had a nap in the bath. Ambulance came because I've never fainted before. That was like really weird. And they said my blood sugars were low, which I guess can happen to people that aren't diabetic. But once being diagnosed and like a few years later thinking about it, I had like funny events that made me think, oh crap, I must have been diabetic for a really long time before I was actually diagnosed. Because I think what can actually happen is your pancreas, I think, so slowly stops giving you insulin. I guess you can go a really long while without knowing you're diagnosed. I remember I used to walk from school to the Waitrose, which was like a 10-minute walk to meet my mum. I didn't know what it was and I never thought anything of it, but I'd be shaking and feel so weak every time I walked there in the heat, and I'd bring a Mars bar in my bag because I knew it would happen. This was like months before I knew what diabetes even was. So I think it just shows you that I must have had it way before I was even diagnosed. Me and my mum found out about this pump called the Omnipod, which wasn't yet in the UK. Nick Jonas from the Jonas Brothers had it, and I was just like, oh my god, that is amazing, because it's literally, I will show you. It's this is my Omnipod. It's totally wireless. It's got insulin all inside of there. So yeah, my mum ended up asking about that, and it only just come into the UK, I think, so they didn't really want to give it to us. But we did get it in the end, and oh my god, I will hands down say I don't know how I used to do separate injections, is you'd have to do injections, one before you go to bed, and then just every single time you ate you'd have to have an injection. So I do not know how I did that. I will say having the Omnipod has been one of the best things I have done. One of the best things I've gotten. Like, it's such a good piece of technology to have. I've got a Libre sensor now, which I will show you. So this is my Libre sensor, which goes on the back of your arm. It comes with this little remote, and basically instead of having to finger prick and get the blood out to test my sugar, I just press this button, scan it on. That is what my blood sugars are. It's literally amazing, the technology they have to help people with diabetes. Having diabetes, it's on your mind all day, every day, without even noticing it. Example, you've just eaten, you're worried what your blood sugars are. You've been sleeping for like hours, you worry what your blood sugars are. You go out for a walk, you worry if your blood sugars are going to drop. It's everything. Everything can affect it. Being stressed, being ill, it's a lot, but you do get used to it. It is second nature. But one thing I will say to sum up what diabetes is, it is a pain in the ass. It is quite hard in my job sometimes because I do have to drive, and when your sugars go low, you're supposed to stop for like 45 minutes after your sugars have gone back up. But I must admit, I do pressure myself to keep on going for the sake of not being late for my calls at work. Sometimes I've been in people's houses and my blood sugars go low and I ignore it and try and get the job done, and then that's when you make mistakes and then you get in, not trouble, but you know, you get told. And I find it really hard to use my diabetes as an excuse for things. Not an excuse, but when it literally is the reason for something going wrong, I find it very hard to use it as the reason because I feel really cringy and like I look like I'm lying. But sometimes it does just make things muck up. When my blood sugars go low, it can make me get really clumsy and I can't think and I'm shaking and I'm like sweating, and that's why you're not allowed to drive when you're like it till like 45 minutes after your levels have gone back up to normal, which makes so much sense. I've heard stories of people getting arrested like because they seem like they're drunk driving but they're not, they're actually just having a really bad hypo, and like I guess the police aren't aware of that, so they arrest them thinking they're drunk driving, but it's not, it's just like their diabetes doing a number on them. Something I will say as well, diabetic people will relate. You tell people you're diabetic and they're like, have you got it bad? If you've got type 1 diabetes, let me just clear this up, you can't have it worse than other people. You either have type 1 diabetes or you don't. The only way you can have it bad is you controlling it bad, or if you just can't get control of it somehow. So it's never a case of having it worse than others with type 1 diabetes. You just have it or you don't, basically. It's all the same, but everyone's got their own way of dealing with it and how their body reacts, I guess. I feel like I've never bloody talked so much in one video before. It's funny because I bet nobody's even watching this bloody video this far anyway. I want to talk about the food situation. So being type 1 diabetic, there is nothing that you can't eat. You can eat everything, and that is what insulin injections are for. You have your insulin, so when you eat, the insulin keeps your blood sugars at bay most of the time. So that is what it was for, basically. So I can eat cake, I can go to Sprinkles and have a nice crepe with like melted chocolate, and yeah, my sugars might go a little bit high, but they won't go insane. Like, I can still eat it. I eat normal like anybody else, except for I have sugar-free drinks. In fact, I drink Diet Coke far too much than what is good for me. Something I say I can eat is when it comes to like actual sweeties, like Haribos or Skittles, you know, like that, you know, where it's just pure bloody sugar. I feel like I'm just like literally thinking of topics I want to discuss. So yeah, diabetes affects a lot in your life, like stuff you wouldn't even think of. Even getting piercings and I guess tattoos as well, you have to be careful because diabetes can affect the healing. It can make it prolong. I've never had an issue with that. I've got loads of tattoos, I've got a good few piercings. I've never had an issue, I don't think anyway. I think I've healed like normal. And I guess maybe that depends on how your sugar control is. Teddy, can you stop growling at the garden for a second? With the amount I talked in this video, I may as well have just done like a sit down talking one, but I've never done that before and I feel like it'd be boring, so I needed to be doing something, you know? I'm just gonna like crack on with my winged eyeliner and get that done. I'm sure I could blabber on a whole lot more on my diabetes situation and how it affects me. I think I am going to try and like incorporate more diabetes videos onto my channel. In a way, I think it would be a good way to sort of express myself with it, because I don't really talk about it with people, I think. So maybe it'd be nice for any other diabetic people out there to maybe relate. Anyway, I doubt many people got to the end of this video. I don't even know how long this video is. I just blabbered a whole bloody lot. It was totally unorganised, but that is just the score. Thank you very much for watching my video. Before you leave, don't forget to give me a big thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!